Why the Big Beautiful Bill targets the rural middle class. Project 2025 claims to focus on the following, but in reality, it's just about tax cuts for the ultra wealthy. You see, tax cuts are going to cost 6 trillion, and only 2 trillion is going to come from GDP growth. So the wealthy needs 4 trillion in new dollars. Enter the Big Beautiful Bill. It can take a half trillion from the bottom and 1 trillion from other sources. And it's going to take 2.5 trillion from the rural middle class. But why rural America? Well, there are at least 7 reasons. 1. The 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act did not pay for itself. Not even close. Huge surge in unsecured debt. Well, that's known as gross fiscal irresponsibility, or GFI. It's often hyperinflationary. As we saw starting in 2018, it's a huge story until COVID. And that inflation survived COVID. In fact, it looks a lot like what we saw in Latin America, which is where we got this term, gross physical irresponsibility, and where we learned that somebody always pays for it. That somebody was all of us after the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, as we can see in models. If we look at the inflation data, then we can have a model that fits through COVID by using a local offset, and we can actually forecast inflation growth post-COVID. And there's the forecast cone. This suggests inflation survived COVID, but doesn't explain all of post-COVID inflation. But knowing this, Project 2025 chooses a somebody to pay for the Big Beautiful Bill's gross physical irresponsibility. So it's not all of us, because that includes them. 2. The wealthy get more from the government than they pay to the government, as we see with Tesla. And this is going to continue in 2025 and 2026. And wealthy aren't going to pay for these tax cuts. 3. The bottom doesn't have trillions to transfer up. So there are about 25 million households at the bottom, and we can take about 2,000 from them in this method. That's about 50 billion a year, which is 500 billion or a half trillion over 10 years. Not nearly enough. 4. The rural middle class does have trillions, as you can see here. 2.5 trillion, according to this. And most of that 2.5 trillion can be extracted via safety net cuts. The Big Beautiful Bill, eligibility requirements and verification creates huge amounts of red tape. That's very hard on rural residents. Cuts to states' administrative funds means millions of rural residents will intentionally fall through the cracks. The safety net cuts will lead to rural healthcare system collapse. Huge savings for the Big Beautiful Bill. For example, doubling verification frequency to every 6 months in the Medicaid expansion states. Even if you were just verifying residency, if you double the frequency, you double the administration costs, you double caseworker visits, you double insurer and provider paperwork. And so if you're verifying work, you're going to get an explosion in red tape so large that millions never get enrolled. And that's who the GOP calls the lazy. But what about rural? Well, you're hours from caseworkers. Urban, bus right away. The Big Beautiful Bill's admin overload is a red tape explosion that's also going to blow up employer-based healthcare, in fact, the entire healthcare system. 5. Rural America has very little political power. You see, gerrymandering dissolves rural voters into suburban districts. To illustrate, both of these have the same number of red and blue. We want to split them into 4 districts. A fair split would give us 2 Democratic and 2 Republican, and it would preserve a rural district. But a gerrymander? Well, sure, we have 3 Republican districts now, but the rural is minority in all the Republican districts. So whose issues are dominant? For example, Tennessee's population is 50% rural, but there's only one of its 9 congressional districts that is currently rural dominant. Rural Tennesseans have, on average, a 2-year shorter lifespan than the rest of the country. Maybe because they have no voice politically. And this example is what's known as the Chattanooga district, has been called that my whole life. But the rural people there may as well be on Mars. This is what it looked like in 1983. And this anti-neighbor gerrymandering isolates everyone. For example, this looks like a good congressional district, but it includes Oak Ridge and Knoxville. A national lab and a university, well, that would mean it was a blue district. Can't have that happening. See, this isolation and little power is essential to Project 2025's goal of financing tax cuts for the wealthy via the Big Beautiful Bill's impoverishment of rural America. 6. Farm country is often a target, as we saw in the first Trump administration when farm failures and foreclosures went up in 2019. So what are we going to expect next? Well, it's the same dynamics as 2018 to 21. We should expect the same result. Except this time, mass deportation will eliminate migrant labor. Migrants send 100 billion home each year. Wealthy can't get their hands on it. So Project 2025, via the Big Beautiful Bill Act, replaces migrants with newly impoverished rural Americans. And here are the references in Project 2025 for where they describe how to do that. 7. America first means wealthy America first. And the wealthy America wants our land. Here you can see Project 2025 describing how lands should be managed and its implementation in the Big Beautiful Bill, logging, cutting national park budgets, rescinding funding for national park employees. The Project 2025's vision for America is government of and for the wealthy, featuring brutal control of the non-wealthy and extreme rural poverty. Where have we heard that before? Project 2025 wants us to become like Latin America. And the Big Beautiful Bill is going to make it happen. And there are more. But in summary, what have we shown? Tax cuts for the wealthy give us big deficits. Big deficits leads to gross fiscal irresponsibility. Somebody always pays for gross physical irresponsibility. Always. The bottom's too poor. So Project 2025 is going to make rural America pay. And the Project 2025 implemented into the Big Beautiful Bill implements that exploitation of rural America. It's not too late to save rural America. Let's repeal the Big Beautiful Bill and replace it with something better.